Hey there, and welcome to Slate Create. I'm going to run you through a little tutorial on the setup, usage, and customization. So firstly, you're going to need to place both the Slate Create JSX bin and the Slate Create resources folder into the appropriate directory for Mac or PC. Okay, so once the script and the script folder are in the right directory, you're going to go into After Effects, go up to Window, choose Slate Create. You will get your Slate Create panel. This is how it should look upon first install. Pretty much empty with defaults as text field 1 through 6 and pretty much nothing selected. But first, let's take a quick look at this in action, and then we will go through all the setup of options and customization. So let's quickly just drop a video in here. We'll comp it. As you can see, it's just a comp of a little video wormhole animation. Now, if we want to add a slate to this, we will go over to Slate Create. We'll leave pretty much all the options as default for now, but we'll just add in a couple parameters for the text field. So we'll call this wormhole. We'll just say this is a test client name. And let's put in version 10. I'm going to leave everything else blank. It will just not display if the other text fields aren't used. I will hit Generate Slate. And as you notice, the Slate templating system has been loaded in. It has created a new comp named as my original comp but underscore Slate. And within that comp, it has added the actual Slate countdown followed by my video. The text has been all populated from my panel, and it's all set to go. You'll find this to be a big time saver if you add a lot of slates to your videos. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at some of the options. So up here, first option is mode. Currently in defaults to generate using text fields, which is what I'm using here, these 6 text fields that are that you can easily just enter content into. The other option is to generate using composition name. So let's see how this works. When you select it, all the text fields disappear because you no longer need it. I'm going to go ahead and delete this stuff just so it's not, you can see what's going on. I'm going to take my composition, and now using the naming, essentially what it does is it takes the naming and it splits it up and uses the elements from the name to populate the Slate text fields. And you determine that by separating those fields with an underscore. So let's say I want my first text field to be wormhole, my second to be client name. I want my third to be the dimensions, let's say, and the fourth will be V2. So now that I have my name set up, structured the way I want it, all I have to do now is simply select the comp and hit Generate Slate. And you'll notice that all the information in the slate was populated from the name of the comp, wormhole, client name, size, and the version. So that is the secondary mode. Templates. This comes with 3 template setups that you can use. Currently, they're set up to be 1 horizontal, 1 square, and 1 vertical. But they could actually be used for all horizontals, all squares, all verticals, really whatever you want. And those designed templates are customizable so that you can swap out your own designs. Horizontal will 16:9 aspect ratio. If you're just into like broadcast stuff, will probably be all you use. But if you do a lot of social media, square and vertical will certainly come in handy. And the square version, as noted here, works with all aspect ratios. When the slate is created, it will determine the frame rate it needs and the sizing it needs, as well as the duration. So all that's taken care of. But when using odd-sized aspect ratios, you'll likely want to use square. That way you're guaranteed that your slate will fit within the parameters of the video aspect ratio. Slate length, this lets you choose a length that the slate counts down from. 3 being the minimum, up to the old standard 8-second countdown. Text fields, as we discussed, this is for the using text field mode. Currently, when you boot this up, the header names will default as text field 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The reason I've done this is just so that you can easily tell when looking at the template. You can see which text field relates to each panel text field. So it's easier to know when you're setting up the design, what goes to what. But ultimately, people are not going to probably want to use text field 1 and 2 and 3, all these as their typical header names. They'll want something that's more customized to their needs. So maybe their top line is client and project name or whatever it is. You can customize that pretty easily by going into the settings button, and you have it right here. So if I set this to project name, and then let's say client name, and I'll just leave the rest the same for now. And now you can see that these have been updated, and these will remain your preferences even after you close Slate Create or After Effects. Let's go down to these further options. So show date on Slate, that will essentially take a date stamp from your computer and add it to the Slate so that you have the date automatically on there. If you don't want it in the format that it is, you could always use a text field to add the date as well. Show TRT, this is the total runtime of the video that you're adding the Slate to. It does not include the time of the Slate. Trim work area. If you have a work area designated within your composition that you're adding the Slate to, if you have this selected, it will actually trim your comp down before adding the Slate. And just to note, it doesn't actually trim your main composition. It makes a duplicate, trims it, and then sticks the Slate on it. That way your original composition isn't changed in any way. Launch render queue does just that. When you have this selected, the minute that you generate a Slate for a video, it will launch the render queue, so you can just go right into rendering. Encode output name. This only works if you have launch render queue selected, but essentially what it does is it takes the name of your composition and it will replace any special characters or spaces with underscores, just so that when output and if put online, there aren't any issues with connecting to the video. I've heard that PCs have had some issues with that. Add video timecode. This adds a video timecode on top of the video that you have added the Slate to. The video timecode does not appear over the Slate. And then the last two options are use a 2-pop to black. So what this does is, if selected, it'll count down to 2. It'll do a 2-pop beep before going to black and holding for 2 seconds before showing your video. This additional option just allows you to include the 2-pop audio if you want it or not. So let's go ahead and just see all these options in action so you can get a sense of what they do. So we're back in my animation. I'm going to go ahead and select all of these, just so we can see what they do. Let's go ahead and change the length to 8 seconds. And we're still using horizontal, so we'll keep that the same. And so we'll generate the Slate. Okay, so what do we have going on here? Down here, you can see we've added the date on the Slate and the TRT. So it's a 12-second, 15-frame animation. The render queue has automatically been launched, and the name, if you look, has been reworked to use underscores. So where a client in name had a space, it's filled that in with underscores. So that's all ready to go. If we go to the actual composition, as you can see, we're starting at an 8-second countdown. As it gets down to 2, we have a 2-pop that goes to black. And then it goes into our video, which now also includes a time code. That's always handy if clients need to call out specific things within the video. So that is really all of those options. Let's go ahead and talk about the last set here. Clear does just that. If I hit clear, it will essentially set everything back to defaults. It will clear all my text fields, all my options, and it will just take it back to the default settings. Save my panel is a handy little thing, especially if you're finding yourself going back to the same project over and over and having to output more versions. So let's just say I had wormhole, client, and version 3. What I could do is, let's say I know that tomorrow I'm going to be working on this. I'll want to save this as default, so I can save my panel. It's now saved. And the next day when I come back to this, if it's cleared, I can just simply load my panel and it will put back in everything I saved. That can include all of these options too. So if I save these, I clear it, and I load it, you'll notice that everything is handled and reverts back to what I'd saved. A nice little additional feature is anytime a slate is generated, it will remember all the information for the last generated slate, and it will, anytime you open Slate Create, will default to the last generated slate. So currently I have this saved, but let's say I changed it to, just put in a couple test items. So let's say I have test, test, test. I generate my slate. I now have it as test, test, test. I haven't saved it, but I'm going to go ahead and close my panel. Now let's pretend like I come back the next day and I'm using Slate Create for the first time. You'll notice that Slate Create loads up whatever I had generated last. So because I had generated test, test, test last, all the settings from my last generation are ready to go. And that's really handy in case, the last project you worked on, you just need to get right back into it. But I can also load the panel that I had intentionally saved by clicking this, and you'll notice it goes back to the settings that I had when I had saved my panel. So 2 nice little save features that just will help with ease of use so that you're not having to write in stuff every single time. So that is about it with the options. You can go into, there are more settings in help where you can go in here and see additional settings and instructions and work with the licensing information. Other than that, that's pretty much all the options. So let's go ahead and dive into customizing the design of the template. Okay, so let's take a look at customizing your own design. You firstly need to open up the Slate Create templating file, which you can find in the Slate Create resources folder, which you had installed when installing the script. Once in there, you'll see Slate Create After Effects project. Go ahead and open that up, and you will notice that there is a master folder called Slate Create, which will contain all the comps and assets for these templates. It's important to note that you should not rename any of the folders or comps that are in here. A lot of these depend on their naming for the panel to send them data. And so changing any of these names, like template 1, 2, and 3 for the comp could break the system. It's also important to note that you shouldn't change the dimensions of any of these templates, the length of them, really any of the main settings you shouldn't need to touch. Slate Create will handle things like the frame rate change automatically and the repositioning of the comp to fit the correct time frame needed. So any other changes you make, again, could potentially break things. So when you're ready to add your own design, there's a couple notes here that kind of go through just some of the basics to keep in mind when prepping these templates. One of the major things, again, is all the layers that are marked red. Those should not be deleted, or the names shouldn't be changed. As you can see, text layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, all of those correspond with these text fields over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. I've done this so that you can easily tell, this text field layer corresponds to this one, so that you know when laying out your information for the slate, you know exactly where it's going to be populated. But again, just make sure not to change the names of any of those layers or delete them. If you don't want to use them for any reason, you're welcome to guide them or turn them off or just move them off screen, and that should suffice. When adding your own images, you're going to be dropping those into the images folder. I would recommend primarily using vector art because this template is set up to scale up or down depending on the size of the video you're adding the slate to. I had initially wanted to use detailed preserving upscale if sizing up, but figured that would not be as friendly for vector artwork. So try, if you can, to use vector artwork. If you need to use bitmap images, I would recommend bringing in like super high resolution images and then scaling them down to fit within the templated area. That way, if they are sized up, they still look nice and crisp. So that's really general information for all templates. The template 1 is currently set up to be a horizontal, template 2 a square, and template 3 a vertical. You can certainly keep them as these 3 and just have a different layout for your one slate design. Or if, let's say, you only use horizontal, you're welcome to convert template 2 and 3 to horizontals. As you can see, I have guides for the different aspect ratios in here, and you're welcome to have 3 different horizontal templates if you wanted, just with different designs, if that's what fits your needs best. The nicest thing about the square aspect ratio and using it is that it will work for really any sized video. As you can see, the vertical, the horizontal, and the square, this content that I've laid out for the square will fit within any of these sizes. Yes, you'll have a little bit of gapping on the top or the bottom depending on which side you generate, but it's really a nice catch-all if you just want to have one template. If you do this, I would recommend extending your background art to cover the other aspect ratio guides. That way you'll at least fill in some artwork around the main design. As you can see, I've kind of done that with the arrows here. Another note about the layers down here: when adding your own art, feel free to put them wherever you want. The stacking order of the layers is not important. You can move those around however you want, and it won't break things. Again, it's really just a matter of how they're named that's important. So other than that, that's really about it. If you have any questions or issues, just create a support ticket or just contact me and I can help you through it. Thanks.